she said, her gaze unwavering and steady, her tone carrying the weight of unshakable certainty. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the air shifting in that moment as everyone awaited what would come next. Without hesitation, Amara reached into her briefcase and produced a document, sliding it smoothly across the gleaming surface of the table toward the center, ensuring that all eyes could see it. The paper was a legal certificate, irrefutable proof of her majority ownership of the company, a fact that none of the assembled members had anticipated or even suspected. It was a culmination of years of quiet, strategic investment, a brilliant long-term plan that had been meticulously executed in the shadows after a hostile takeover years before had wrested control from her family's hands. She had silently reacquired power piece by piece, outmaneuvering rivals and masking her moves behind layers of corporate veils and silent shareholders, all while quietly building the foundation for this very moment. Richard's face paled as the reality sank in, his jaw dropping in utter disbelief, then swiftly morphing into raw panic. The confident veneer he had maintained for so long cracked and crumbled before the assembled board, revealing a man who suddenly understood he was no longer in control. His eyes darted nervously around the room, seeking allies or an escape, but found only faces etched with shock, disbelief, and dawning realization. Gasps erupted from the board members, some standing abruptly, others sinking back into their chairs, overwhelmed by the seismic shift in power and the weight of their own complicity in the misjudgments that had allowed this moment to come to pass. The air, once thick with quiet tension, now buzzed with whispers and stammered questions as the implications of Amara's revelation rippled through the group like an electric shock. For years, many had underestimated her, not just as a businesswoman but as a force to be reckoned with, dismissing her due to her absence during the company's darkest hours, unaware that she had never truly left the battlefield. Now in this single, decisive moment, she had upended their assumptions and rewritten the rules of engagement. The emotional impact was immense and multifaceted, touching every soul present in the room. For Amara, it was a moment of vindication, a triumph born not out of anger or revenge, but of patience, intelligence, and unyielding resolve. She felt the burden of past defeats and doubts lift from her shoulders as she stood tall, her posture radiating the quiet strength of someone who had finally reclaimed what was always hers. For Richard, it was the crushing realization that his reign was over, that the empire he had believed was his by right was slipping through his fingers like sand. His panic was not just about losing control, but about the public unmasking of his arrogance and miscalculations. For the board members, the revelation forced an immediate reckoning with their own roles. Some had been silent enablers, others had ignored warning signs, and now all had to face the consequences of their poor judgment and failure to see the bigger picture. This dramatic reversal of fortune was more than a corporate coup. It was a deeply human story of resilience, power, and justice. It was a reminder that control is never permanent, and that true strength often lies in the unseen, strategic moves made in quiet determination rather than loud declarations. Amara's calm declaration and presentation of proof sent a clear message not only to those in the room but to everyone watching. The underdog can rise, the oppressed can reclaim power, and no legacy is lost forever if one possesses the will and wisdom to fight back. As the boardroom slowly regained its composure, the narrative of dominance and defeat had been irrevocably rewritten. The room that once echoed with Richard's confident commands now buzzed with cautious anticipation, waiting to see how Amara would lead them forward from the ashes of upheaval. She remained composed, knowing that this victory was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would require not just ownership on paper, but the courage to steer the company toward a future shaped by vision, integrity, and inclusive leadership. In that moment, as eyes met hers with a mix of awe and acceptance, Amara embodied the spirit of transformation, the idea that true power is not seized through force alone, but reclaimed through perseverance, strategy, and an unbreakable belief in oneself. The boardroom's breath was finally released, but the impact of her words and revelation would echo far beyond those walls, marking the dawn of a new era in the company's history and in Amara's life. The boardroom was a tempest of emotions as the dust settled from the explosive revelations that had laid Richard Thorne bare, his carefully constructed facade of confidence shattered, replaced by the desperate vulnerability of a man caught in the crosshairs of his own undoing. His voice, once commanding and unassailable, now trembled with incoherent apologies and frantic denials, each word a stark contrast to the arrogance he had once wielded as a weapon against his adversaries. The faces around him shifted between shock, disdain, and a bitter satisfaction as they witnessed the unraveling of a man who had long believed himself untouchable, his power a fortress immune to challenge. Yet amid the chaos, Amara stood apart, calm, poised, and resolute, a pillar of strength whose presence demanded attention and respect. She did not waver, her eyes sharp with determination as she addressed the board with the clarity and authority that had defined her leadership from the beginning. Methodically, she outlined the immediate consequences of Richard's actions, her voice steady but laced with an unyielding firmness that left no room for debate. Each word cut through the tension like a blade, signaling a swift and decisive reckoning. When she announced Richard's dismissal, the room seemed to hold its breath, the finality of her decree stripping him of power and status in a public and undeniable fashion. The fall from grace was swift and humiliating. The man who had once sought to dominate and intimidate was now reduced to a defeated figure, his influence erased before those he had hoped to impress and manipulate. But Amara's resolve did not stop there. With unwavering resolve, she revealed plans for a complete restructuring of the board, an overhaul designed not only to remove Richard, but also to root out those who had conspired with him and those who had remained silent, complicit in their inaction. Her decisions were swift, decisive, and uncompromising, reflecting a leadership style that demanded accountability and integrity above all else. The weight of her words settled over the room like a new dawn, signaling a turning point where justice was not just served, but embodied in the transformation of power itself. The emotional undercurrent of the scene was profound. Satisfaction mingled with relief, hope intertwined with a fierce determination to build something stronger from the ruins of deceit. Those who had lived under Richard's shadow now witnessed the rise of a leader who embodied the principles of fairness and courage, whose authority was rooted not in fear, but in respect and conviction. For Amara, the moment was a vindication of her perseverance and strength, a testament to her ability to navigate treacherous waters and emerge victorious without compromising her values. The boardroom, once a battleground of hidden agendas and whispered betrayals, was now the stage for a new chapter, one where power was reclaimed not through manipulation or coercion, but through justice, transparency, and unyielding resolve. In this charged atmosphere, the fall of Richard and the rise of Amara served as a compelling narrative of redemption and retribution, a reminder that true leadership is forged not in moments of ease, but in the crucible of crisis and conflict. The emotional satisfaction of the scene resonated deeply, reflecting universal themes of justice prevailing over corruption, strength triumphing over deceit, and the enduring power of principled leadership. As the echoes of the confrontation faded, the future of the company and the board itself stood on the brink of transformation, shaped irrevocably by the courage of one woman to stand firm in the face of betrayal and to restore power to its rightful place. This moment, charged with raw emotion and high stakes, left an indelible impression. That integrity, when wielded with conviction, is the most formidable force of all. Amara's story was not one of overnight success or fortunate happenstance, but rather a long, arduous journey marked by sacrifice, resilience, and an unyielding fire to reclaim what had been unjustly taken from her family. Years ago, when the company her parents had painstakingly built over generations was ripped away through deceit and manipulation, a seed of quiet fury was planted deep within her heart. The loss was devastating, not only the material wealth, but the legacy, the pride, and the identity tied to that business. Yet amidst the rubble of betrayal and injustice, Amara found a purpose sharper than pain. She would restore her family's name, no matter the cost. In the face of dismissive glances and sneering doubts from men like Richard, whose arrogance blinded them to her resolve, she masked her true intentions behind a calm exterior, biding her time. Night after night, she pored over financial reports, studied market trends, and mapped out a meticulous plan, aware that every move had to be calculated with precision. Her investments were not reckless gambles, but deliberate strikes on the chessboard of corporate power. Each alliance forged with care, each dollar placed to gradually tip the scales in her favor. The loneliness of this clandestine crusade weighed heavily on her. Friends drifted away. The corporate boardroom, with its sleek glass walls and austere modern decor, was suffused with a cold, heavy tension that pressed down on everyone present. At its center sat Amara Vance, a brilliant and dedicated CEO in her late 30s, whose reputation for innovation and resilience had propelled her company into new heights. Yet today was not a day for celebration. Instead, the atmosphere felt charged with hostility and betrayal, as the boardroom became an arena for a ruthless power struggle. Amara's eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of the board members, some etched with discomfort, others betraying thinly veiled satisfaction, as the final moments of a shocking vote concluded. The motion to remove her from her position had passed, blindsiding her with its cold efficiency, orchestrated with deliberate precision by the arrogant chairman, Richard Thorne. Richard, a man in his early 60s, sat back in his leather chair, a smug smile playing on his lips, his eyes gleaming with a venom born of long-held resentment. It was no secret that his bitterness toward Amara's success, and the fact that she was a black woman, had festered beneath the surface for years. Now, with the weight of authority behind him, he seized the moment to strike a cruel personal blow. "Amara," he began, his voice sharp and dripping with disdain, "I suggest you pack your trash and never darken this boardroom again." The words landed like a slap, brutal in their simplicity, and charged with the intent to wound. The room fell deathly silent, the only sound the faint rustle of papers and the barely contained gasp of a few sympathetic colleagues. Amara's heart clenched, but her face remained composed, a mask of dignified calm that concealed the storm raging within. She did not rise to meet his provocation with anger or tears. Instead, she quietly reached down and began to gather her belongings. Her hands moved deliberately, folding documents and placing personal items into a plain yellow box, the color stark against the polished mahogany table, each movement a testament to her grace under pressure. Every word Richard spat out sought to chip away at her dignity, to reduce her to a caricature of failure. Yet Amara endured it with a quiet strength that spoke louder than any defense she could mount. The humiliation was palpable, etched into the lines of her jaw and the steady rhythm of her breath as she knelt to pack, a poignant image of vulnerability amidst the harsh glare of power. Around her, the board members' reactions varied. Some averted their eyes, discomfort clear on their faces, unwilling witnesses to the cruelty unfolding. Others watched with cold satisfaction, their allegiance to Richard's agenda clear in their expressions. The air was thick with an uneasy mix of shame and complicity, a reminder that beneath the polished veneer of corporate success lay currents of bias and injustice that too often went unchallenged. Yet as Amara's fingers closed the lid of the yellow box, something deeper stirred within her. Not defeat, but a quiet resolve. This moment, as painful as it was, would not be the end of her story. She rose slowly, the weight of years of dedication and fight reflected in the steady set of her shoulders. Richard's final gaze, meant to break her, instead met a quiet fire burning in her eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with unspoken truths and the heavy cost of ambition clashing with prejudice. As she turned to leave, Amara's steps were measured but unwavering, carrying her out of the boardroom and into an uncertain future. The humiliation inflicted that day was undeniable, but so too was the strength it revealed, a reminder that true leadership is forged not just in moments of triumph, but in the grace and resilience displayed in the face of adversity. Outside, the world awaited her next move, a landscape as vast and challenging as the battles she had already faced. And within her, beneath the wounds of that cold, harsh afternoon, a fire burned brighter than ever, a fire that would fuel her rise beyond the confines of that boardroom and beyond the limits others tried to impose. Amara Vance was not just a fallen CEO, she was a force of change, a beacon of hope for those who dared to defy the odds, and a testament to the enduring power of dignity and determination in the face of humiliation. Amara's hands trembled slightly as she continued to pack, each movement heavy with the weight of humiliation inflicted by Richard's relentless verbal assault, a barrage of sharp words designed to belittle and break her spirit. The office, once a place where she had poured her dedication and loyalty, now felt like a battleground, every whispered insult a fresh wound. Richard's cruelty escalated beyond words when, with a deliberate act of disdain, he stepped on the scattered papers she had so carefully arranged, crushing them beneath his polished shoe as if to trample not just the documents but her very dignity. The shock of that moment, A mix of shame, anger, and disbelief was nearly enough to push Amara to the brink, threatening to unravel the composure she had so painstakingly maintained. But beneath the surface of her anguish, something profound stirred. A quiet ember of defiance ignited not by fiery rage but by a resolute clarity, born from years of quiet endurance and unwavering integrity. That spark was subtle at first, a flicker of light in the darkness of humiliation, but it quickly grew into a steady flame that infused her with a newfound strength and purpose. As Richard continued his tirade, expecting her to crumble under the weight of his contempt, Amara's eyes shifted with a calm intensity that caught the attention of everyone in the room, piercing through the charged silence that had fallen. With deliberate slowness, as if to reclaim control over the chaos he had created, she reached beneath the pile of papers and carefully withdrew a document she had secretly set aside earlier. A confidential legal paper that held within it the key to a truth long hidden, a revelation that would upend the power dynamics Richard so arrogantly wielded. Rising from her kneeling position, her movements measured and dignified despite the turmoil inside, Amara's gaze locked with Richard's, steady and unwavering. There was a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her lips, a quiet but unmistakable signal that the moment of reckoning was at hand. The room, filled with stunned board members and silent witnesses, seemed to hold its breath as the tension coiled tighter, the air thick with anticipation. This was no longer just a confrontation. It was the calm before a storm, the pause before a dramatic reversal that would shatter Richard's smug confidence and rewrite the narrative of power and justice in the room. Amara's defiance was not loud or explosive. It was the quiet strength of a woman who had endured too much to be broken, whose integrity had become her armor, and whose courage was now ready to illuminate the truth. The document in her hand symbolized more than legal proof. It was the embodiment of years of perseverance, the culmination of every silent struggle against injustice she had faced. As she prepared to reveal its contents, the room's energy shifted palpably, the previous atmosphere of intimidation giving way to a charged expectancy that spoke to the universal human longing for justice and vindication. Richard, once so assured in his dominance, found himself confronting an opponent who refused to be diminished, whose quiet power threatened to dismantle the walls of arrogance he had built around himself. The scene was a profound study in contrasts, the aggressive, brash confidence of a man used to control, met with the calm, unwavering resolve of a woman who had found strength in vulnerability and clarity in crisis. Amara's story in that moment became one of transformation, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of truth to disrupt even the most entrenched systems of oppression. It was a reminder that beneath every act of cruelty lies the potential for awakening, and that sometimes the most dramatic victories are born not of loud confrontation, but of quiet, purposeful revelation. In that charged room, as all eyes fixed on her and the secret document that held the promise of justice, Amara embodied the enduring hope that no matter how deep the wounds inflicted by injustice, there is always within us the spark to rise, reclaim our dignity, and change the course of our story. This moment marked not just a turning point in the battle between Amara and Richard, but a universal narrative about courage, integrity, and the indomitable will to seek truth and fairness against all odds, leaving everyone present with a profound sense of awe and inspiration that lingered long after the room had emptied and silence had settled once again. The tension in the boardroom was palpable, a thick, suffocating silence that seemed to stretch endlessly between the rows of polished mahogany tables and leather chairs, as if every breath was held collectively by the dozen or so executives gathered inside. At the center of this storm stood Amara, who just moments before had been quietly observing, her posture composed yet commanding in a way that now drew every eye to her like a magnet. She had entered the room with an air of quiet confidence, her every move measured and deliberate, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind, waiting for the perfect instant to unveil the truth that would change everything. Across from her, Richard, the CEO who had long wielded power over the company with a mix of arrogance and entitlement, sat rigid, his usual smugness replaced by an expression of disbelief that grew with each passing second. When Amara finally spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and resolute, cutting through the silence like a sharpened blade. "You can't fire me, Richard." Relationships frayed under the strain of her single-minded pursuit, and moments of doubt crept in during the quiet hours when she was alone with her thoughts. Yet through every setback and sleepless night, Amara's belief in herself never wavered. She drew strength from the memory of her family's dignity, from the whispered encouragement of her mother's voice, and from the fiery conviction that she was the rightful heir to what had been stolen. When the day finally came that she revealed her controlling shares and unmasked the web of strategy that had been woven in shadows, it was more than a business victory. It was a reclamation of identity, justice, and self-worth. Her triumph was not born of luck, but forged in the crucible of perseverance, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit, making her success not only poignant, but profoundly relatable to anyone who has ever fought against the odds to reclaim their rightful place in the world. Amara's journey was a long and winding path, carved through years of hardship, sacrifice, and relentless determination, a path that few truly understood, but one that defined her entire existence. It all began with a devastating blow that shattered her world: the unjust takeover of her family's company, a business built over generations through hard work, vision, and an unshakable commitment to integrity. When deceit and manipulation stripped her family of their legacy, it was more than just a loss of wealth. It was an assault on their identity, their honor, and everything they had worked so hard to create. For Amara, this moment of profound injustice ignited a quiet but fierce fire within her. A fire that would fuel a mission not just to reclaim material ownership, but to restore her family's name and dignity. Unlike many who might have crumbled under the weight of such a betrayal, Amara resolved to turn her pain into power, her anger into strategy, and her heartbreak into a meticulously crafted plan for revenge, not a reckless act of vengeance, but a calculated, strategic reclamation. From that point forward, Amara's life became a delicate balancing act, where every decision was weighed against the long-term goal of regaining control of what was stolen. She immersed herself in the complex world of finance, corporate law, and business strategy, disciplines that were once foreign to her, but soon became tools she wielded with growing expertise. Night after night, while others rested or celebrated small victories, Amara pored over financial reports, scrutinized market movements, and dissected corporate hierarchies with the precision of a chess master, plotting the ultimate checkmate. Her investments were never impulsive. Each was a deliberate move to acquire shares bit by bit, invisibly strengthening her position within the company's structure without drawing unwanted attention. She formed alliances with key players, individuals who, like her, recognized the value of patience, discretion, and timing. These partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared vision, even if those allies were unaware of the full depth of her personal mission. Throughout this arduous journey, Amara faced countless obstacles, not least of which were the dismissive attitudes of men like Richard. Men who saw her not as a formidable strategist, but as an outsider, a woman whose presence in boardrooms was an anomaly to be overlooked or undermined. Richard, with his smug confidence and patronizing tone, embodied the very resistance Amara had to overcome daily. Each sneer, each underestimation, only steeled her resolve further. She learned to mask her true ambitions behind a composed and unassuming facade, using the world's ignorance as a cloak to protect her secret. This duplicity, necessary as it was, came at a great personal cost. The loneliness of carrying such a heavy burden in silence was profound. Friends and acquaintances who once knew the vibrant, approachable woman faded away as Amara's world narrowed to the singular goal that consumed her. Intimate relationships strained under the weight of secrecy and the long hours of solitary work. Doubts and fears occasionally crept into her thoughts. Was this sacrifice worth it? Would she ever reclaim what was lost? But each time, the memory of her family's pride and her mother's encouraging words rekindled her courage and sharpened her focus. As years passed, Amara's efforts began to bear fruit. The small incremental acquisitions of shares accumulated quietly until her stake in the company was no longer insignificant. Behind the scenes, she had become a major player, a silent force poised to change the game. Yet she did not rush. She understood that timing was everything. Premature exposure could unravel the delicate balance she had maintained. Her victory would come not through brash confrontation, but through the revelation of a well-executed plan, a final move that would reclaim her family's legacy with undeniable authority. When that moment arrived, it was more than a business maneuver. It was an emotional crescendo, the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering faith in her own capabilities. The unveiling of her controlling shares stunned those who had underestimated her, especially men like Richard, whose arrogance had blinded them to the quiet strength that Amara possessed. But beyond the corporate triumph lay a deeper victory: Amara's reclamation of her identity and self-worth. This was not simply about regaining financial control or asserting dominance in a boardroom. It was about restoring justice, honoring her family's name, and proving to herself and the world that she was more than the sum of others' doubts and underestimations. Her success was a testament to the power of perseverance, intelligence, and strategic patience. It resonated deeply because it reflected a universal truth. Sometimes the most profound victories come not from loud confrontations or dramatic gestures, but from the steady, often lonely, work of building something back one careful step at a time. Amara's story adds a rich layer of depth and complexity to her character, transforming her from a figure of simple triumph to one of nuanced resilience. It invites empathy and admiration, making her journey relatable to anyone who has ever faced injustice, felt underestimated, or fought quietly against overwhelming odds. Her strategic revenge is not just about business. It is a deeply human story about reclaiming power, dignity, and the right to define one's own destiny. In the end, Amara's journey teaches us that true strength often lies in endurance, in the courage to carry heavy burdens alone, and in the unwavering belief that justice, no matter how delayed, can still be achieved through wisdom and perseverance. With Richard and his cronies finally removed from the company's inner circles, Amara stepped into the CEO role with a determination that transcended mere professional ambition. This was a mission fueled by a deep, personal resolve to heal the wounds inflicted by a toxic legacy. She had witnessed firsthand how the previous leadership had fostered an environment where exclusion, favoritism, and disrespect thrived, breeding fear and silencing voices that deserved to be heard. The humiliation she and countless others had endured under Richard's reign was etched into her memory, a constant reminder of the urgent need for change. But Amara knew that change could not be achieved through superficial reforms or symbolic gestures. It required dismantling the very structures that allowed injustice to fester and rebuilding them on a foundation of fairness, respect, and genuine inclusion. From the moment she took charge, she set out to transform not only policies but the culture itself. She began by identifying and removing the entrenched systems that rewarded conformity over merit, privilege over talent. No longer would promotions be handed out to those with connections or shared backgrounds. Instead, Amara instituted rigorous, transparent hiring and evaluation processes that honored skill, dedication, and character. She actively sought to bring in diverse talent, recognizing that innovation and growth flourished best in environments where varied perspectives, experiences, and voices coexisted and collaborated. This was not diversity for appearance's sake, but a deliberate, heartfelt commitment to building a workforce that mirrored the rich, complex tapestry of society itself. Yet Amara's vision went far beyond recruitment. She understood that true inclusion meant creating a workplace where every individual felt valued, supported, and empowered to bring their whole selves to work. Drawing from her own experiences of marginalization and the loneliness that came with being judged for her gender, race, and appearance, she championed policies that prioritized employee well-being at every turn. Flexible working hours, comprehensive mental health support, mentorship programs, and channels for honest dialogue were introduced, each designed to foster a culture of care and trust. Amara often walked the office floors, not as a distant executive but as a leader who listened, really listened, to the hopes, fears, and ideas of employees at all levels. She recognized the power of empathy in leadership, how it could break down barriers and build bridges where before there had been walls. Slowly but unmistakably, the company began to change. The once stifling atmosphere, thick with unspoken anxieties and hidden resentments, gave way to an energy charged with possibility and mutual respect. Collaboration replaced competition, authenticity replaced pretense, and a collective sense of purpose took root. Beyond the walls of the office, Amara also redefined the company's relationship with the community and the world at large. She infused corporate strategy with social responsibility, championing sustainable practices, ethical sourcing, and initiatives that supported local communities. Relationships frayed under the strain of her single-minded pursuit, and moments of doubt crept in during the quiet hours when she was alone with her thoughts. Yet through every setback and sleepless night, Amara's belief in herself never wavered. She drew strength from the memory of her family's dignity, from the whispered encouragement of her mother's voice, and from the fiery conviction that she was the rightful heir to what had been stolen. When the day finally came that she revealed her controlling shares and unmasked the web of strategy that had been woven in shadows, it was more than a business victory. It was a reclamation of identity, justice, and self-worth. Her triumph was not born of luck but forged in the crucible of perseverance, intelligence, and unbreakable spirit, making her success not only poignant, but profoundly relatable to anyone who has ever fought against the odds to reclaim their rightful place in the world. Amara's journey was a long and winding path, carved through years of hardship, sacrifice, and relentless determination, a path that few truly understood, but one that defined her entire existence. It all began with a devastating blow that shattered her world: the unjust takeover of her family's company, a business built over generations through hard work, vision, and an unshakable commitment to integrity. When deceit and manipulation stripped her family of their legacy, it was more than just a loss of wealth. It was an assault on their identity, their honor, and everything they had worked so hard to create. For Amara, this moment of profound injustice ignited a quiet but fierce fire within her, a fire that would fuel a mission not just to reclaim material ownership, but to restore her family's name and dignity. Unlike many who might have crumbled under the weight of such a betrayal, Amara resolved to turn her pain into power, her anger into strategy, and her heartbreak into a meticulously crafted plan for revenge, not a reckless act of vengeance, but a calculated, strategic reclamation. From that point forward, Amara's life became a delicate balancing act, where every decision was weighed against the long-term goal of regaining control of what was stolen. She immersed herself in the complex world of finance, corporate law, and business strategy, disciplines that were once foreign to her but soon became tools she wielded with growing expertise. Night after night, while others rested or celebrated small victories, Amara pored over financial reports, scrutinized market movements, and dissected corporate hierarchies with the precision of a chess master, plotting the ultimate checkmate. Her investments were never impulsive. Each was a deliberate move to acquire shares bit by bit, invisibly strengthening her position within the company's structure without drawing unwanted attention. She formed alliances with key players, individuals who, like her, recognized the value of patience, discretion, and timing. These partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared vision, even if those allies were unaware of the full depth of her personal mission. Throughout this arduous journey, Amara faced countless obstacles, not least of which were the dismissive attitudes of men like Richard, men who saw her not as a formidable strategist but as an outsider, a woman whose presence in boardrooms was an anomaly to be overlooked or undermined. Richard, with his smug confidence and patronizing tone, embodied the very resistance Amara had to overcome daily. Each sneer, each underestimation only steeled her resolve further. She learned to mask her true ambitions behind a composed and unassuming facade, using the world's ignorance as a cloak to protect her secret. This duplicity, necessary as it was, came at a great personal cost. The loneliness of carrying such a heavy burden in silence was profound. Friends and acquaintances who once knew the vibrant, approachable woman faded away as Amara's world narrowed to the singular goal that consumed her. Intimate relationships strained under the weight of secrecy and the long hours of solitary work. Doubts and fears occasionally crept into her thoughts. Was this sacrifice worth it? Would she ever reclaim what was lost? But each time, the memory of her family's pride and her mother's encouraging words rekindled her courage and sharpened her focus. As years passed, Amara's efforts began to bear fruit. The small incremental acquisitions of shares accumulated quietly until her stake in the company was no longer insignificant. Behind the scenes, she had become a major player, a silent force poised to change the game. Yet she did not rush. She understood that timing was everything. Premature exposure could unravel the delicate balance she had maintained. Her victory would come not through brash confrontation, but through the revelation of a well-executed plan, a final move that would reclaim her family's legacy with undeniable authority. When that moment arrived, it was more than a business maneuver. It was an emotional crescendo, the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering faith in her own capabilities. The unveiling of her controlling shares stunned those who had underestimated her, especially men like Richard, whose arrogance had blinded them to the quiet strength that Amara possessed. But beyond the corporate triumph lay a deeper victory, Amara's reclamation of her identity and self-worth. This was not simply about regaining financial control or asserting dominance in a boardroom. It was about restoring justice, honoring her family's name, and proving to herself and the world that she was more than the sum of others' doubts and underestimations. Her success was a testament to the power of perseverance, intelligence, and strategic patience. It resonated deeply because it reflected a universal truth. Sometimes the most profound victories come not from loud confrontations or dramatic gestures, but from the steady, often lonely work of building something, back one careful step at a time. She understood that a business did not operate in a vacuum but was part of a larger ecosystem where its actions had ripple effects far beyond profits and losses. This holistic approach resonated deeply with employees and stakeholders alike, inspiring pride and renewed commitment to the company's mission. Yet the path was far from easy. Amara faced resistance, from old loyalties still lingering in the shadows, from skeptics doubting whether genuine transformation was possible, and from the internal pressure of balancing compassion with the hard decisions leadership demanded. There were moments when progress seemed slow, when setbacks threatened to overshadow hard-won gains. But through every challenge, Amara's resolve only grew stronger. Her leadership was a delicate dance of strength and vulnerability, of holding firm to principles while remaining open to learning and growth. She embodied the change she wished to see, leading not with arrogance or fear but with humility and courage. For Amara, the stakes were deeply personal. Her desire to build a legacy of fairness and opportunity was rooted not in ego, but in a profound commitment to ensure that no one else would endure the humiliations she and so many others had faced. Her vision was of a company where respect was the baseline, where every voice mattered, and where success was measured not just in financial terms but in the lives uplifted and the barriers broken. As the company evolved under her guidance, it became a beacon, a living testament to the power of ethical leadership and inclusive culture. Employees began to see themselves not as mere cogs in a machine, but as valued contributors to a shared vision. The atmosphere buzzed with creativity, innovation, and a renewed sense of hope. And Amara's story, intertwined with the company's, inspired others beyond its walls, showing what was possible when courage met compassion, and when leadership was wielded not for personal gain but for collective good. In the end, Amara knew that the journey toward a truly just and inclusive workplace was ongoing, a continuous process of listening, learning, and evolving. But she also knew this: the foundation had been laid, and with every day that passed, the legacy of fairness, dignity, and opportunity she fought to create grew stronger, ensuring that the shadows of the past would not dictate the future, but rather that future would be shaped by hope, equity, and the unwavering belief in the value of every human being. Amara sat quietly in the dim light of her apartment, the soft glow of the city's evening lights casting long shadows on the walls, mirroring the shadows that lingered in her heart. The public accolades she had recently received for her courage and resilience echoed through news stories and social media, painting her as a symbol of triumph against prejudice and injustice. But beneath the applause, behind the carefully composed statements and public smiles, Amara wrestled with a private turmoil few could see or understand. The years she had spent carrying a secret, the constant pressure to hide her pain, to mask her vulnerability, had left invisible scars far deeper than any outsider could imagine. Her victory, though celebrated widely, was not a balm that instantly healed those wounds. Instead, it unveiled the lingering cost of her fight, the emotional toll that came from living a life in which she had to battle not only external bias, but also the internal erosion of trust and self-worth. In the stillness of her apartment, away from the glare of public scrutiny, Amara allowed herself to feel the full weight of her exhaustion. The humiliation she had suffered at the hands of others was a fresh ache, but the memories of countless small betrayals, dismissals, and microaggressions over the years cut even deeper. They formed a tapestry of pain and resilience woven tightly together, a tapestry that no single moment of victory could undo.